action. The red button has been hit.
Welcome, guys.
Where have we been, Josh?
Fuck it. Software update. We had episode 3.
But we're amateurs.
The genie of sorts took the episode from us. So
it's lost.
It's lost, but not forgotten. Episode 3 was about culture. Wait a minute, hold on, that's not specific enough. Episode 3 is
Where is culture?
Where is culture?
If you had to point to it on a map, where would you point?
If you had to point it to on a map, where would you point?
Is it raining?
Is it raining? Oh,
hey, yo, great. I like that. A little ambiance for the pod. Yeah, so we recorded how long was the episode? It was like an hour long.
The episode was an hour long. This is Software Update. My name is Josh Allen. This is Jeremy Benson. If we were to point to culture on a map, or if we were to think about what does culture look like on the map, where would it be? I think from my notes from whenever we did do the live podcast to the last previous episode, and from the conversations that I still have on this subject.
Yeah, this is very much a living conversation.
It's a living conversation, and I think when it comes to black alternative culture, I think it was birthed in Atlanta from Outkast.
Yeah, Outkast is that's a good starting point.
Like, I think Andre 3000 has transcended what you expect how somebody looks and sound coming from the South.
Right. Because there was I don't know which conversation this was or if it was on the pod or not, but we were talking about how for when you were younger, you thought Outkast was from New York.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I made a comment on another pod episode where I was like, I always thought Playboi Carti was from New York.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this interesting kind of chameleon effect that happens somehow with Atlanta music. Like, in a way, it's both really representative of Atlanta, but it's also like kind of back to that discrepancy. We'll get to that. Between like what they look like and what their music sounds like and what it's representative of. I don't know, just some interesting thoughts.
So I think, my personal output, I think culture of fashion exists between Japan and Paris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had that conversation too around, I think historically, as in pre-COVID, culture had been thought of as like central to places that have history to them, right? So like European culture is clearly like, I mean, even architecturally, like when you talk about the canon, capital C canon, CANON, like the buildings and the architects and the thinkers and the writers and the musicians who are kind of going about their life, being creative, having this output that then gets thought of as like most emblematic or most representative, right? Like arts, for example. And so clearly, like, the Paris, the Milan, London, like those places are going to have a lot of history, just generally speaking, but then particular to like culture and arts and creative output. But then in the context of the U.S., you have places like New York, L.A., where else? Chicago.
As far as in the subject of
just
fashion
like,
culture, or just a culture
I'm just thinking
in
like
general?
culturally dense, culturally rich places.
Right, yes. Miami,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the paradoxical point is like, even though places in Europe and other parts of the world, Japan, same thing, very old place that has like so much history. When you think in the context of how young the U.S. is relative to those places, you almost think to yourself, oh, okay, so it should be that people elsewhere in the world want to be like those other places. But it turns out that you get a lot of references to people really looking towards and wanting to emulate American culture, which to me feels like it kind of betrays the whole line of thinking, which is that history, like long lineage and long history equals cultural importance and relevance, which like it can, but then somehow something occurred or happened in the U.S. What is so particular to the U.S.?
Honestly,
Black
I think
culture.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's hip in a lot of hip hop culture.
Yeah.
Like,
okay, so Arthur Jafa has this thing. I'm gonna reference him a lot. Get used to it. He has this idea where it's like, when people came across the ocean, it's like that's when black people were created. Like black people are an invention, creation, evolution, necessity, whatever you want to call it. They're a function of what occurred in the U.S. And so there's like this interesting, like on one hand is like we are who we are because of what happened to us, right? And so even though we can kind of look back and be like, damn, that was fucked up, but also like, would we be the same without it? Open question.
And I think there is no real answer to the question that we started. I think it's just talking about the subject matter of culture.
Yeah.
And going back to the Black Artist Retreat.
Yes.
I wanted to double click. I've been using double click lately.
It's a good one.
I want to double click on how I feel the culture that the Astor Gates brought here was about preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
No, wait. Hold on. Let's take a pause.
Okay.
Theaster Gates.
If you don't know what Theaster Gates is, look him up. So Theaster Gates is this brilliant artist. I believe he's from Mississippi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I think so.
And he has done a lot of work in Chicago.
Yes.
He had an exhibition here at the Contemporary Arts Museum. And there was a Black Artist Retreat that was started in Chicago, and he decided to do it here in Houston. And through the retreat, we learned about Freemanstown and preserving Freemanstown.
Yeah.
The bricks, the 100-year-old bricks that was, in the ground, and how he used that as like a metaphor for the other things that we saw along the exhibition. Like there was like a brick presser in the exhibition.
So to zoom out real quick, the cool thing about Theaster is he's an artist who works, like if you go and see his works in a museum or in a gallery, you're probably looking at sculpture and or some form of like larger installation. He had a serpentine pavilion that he designed a couple years ago. I think it was in collaboration with David Adjaye. But I would say more principally, he deals with space in an interesting way, and he's interested in like land, and he's interested in ownership and like development and like urban planning. And so like in Chicago, Rebuild Foundation, they have like the Stony Island Arts Bank. He has like a bunch of buildings and like programming around these buildings. If I'm not mistaken, he like owns like Frankie Knuckles catalog.
Yes.
He also has like a library where he has, I believe, all of both Jet and I'm forgetting the other.
Ebony,
yes.
Yeah.
Jet and Ebony, like the full archive
catalog
of their works. Yeah. And so what's super interesting, this is just a sidebar that I really rock with. So he made these works that were using they were using bound books in like different color leather binding, right? And he was effectively creating he was kind of sampling and referencing and doing a 2.0 version of Joseph Albers' Homage to the Square.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're unfamiliar with the Homage to the Square, look up Joseph Albers, Josefalbers. He does these squares. You've probably seen them. They're like different colors. And basically Theaster Gates took books, bound them in different colors, and then assembled them on like basically the shelf that looks like an abstract version of the Homage to the Square. But the books themselves are like bound versions of like Jet and Ebony, and they have interesting names on the titles. And they're very like serious and elegant, but also layered and nuanced. And it's really lovely to see that sort of like, I don't know, connection point through history, right? Where like you have like this white designer artist who comes out of the Bauhaus. Okay, quick sidebar, and this is a hill I'm dying on. Everybody likes to learn color theory from Joseph Albers, but in my opinion, his teacher, Johann Itten, has a far superior color theory book that I suggest everybody to get. It's called Elements of Color, Itten. That's how I learned color theory. It's fire. Albers is cool, but he's not his teacher. So I'm gonna just leave it there. But yeah, I think it's cool that like you have the connection from like Bauhaus, Albers, and then somebody like Theaster, who is black from America, doing sculpture, doing art, and like drawing like reference and inspiration from that, but not in a way that's like so on the nose. It's more like, if you know, you know. Otherwise, it just looks like a cool assemblage of books. And and that's, I think, like what the most cool thing about art is like if you make art that can resonate without you knowing the references, but then knowing the references makes it that much cooler. That to me is...
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. But going back to his exhibition, I took us no, it's okay. Because it goes back to what I learned about preservation. You know, he preserved that hardware store that was about to go out of business in 2020, and he assembled it and created this like gigantic sculpture. And then on top of that, like his father was a roofer, and so he preserved that. Like his father being a roofer, and that's why we saw, what's that painting called? A bright sunny day. Yeah, the big ass yellow tarp that was But that goes back to what I think about Richard and Grace and my practice. With my brand, like those are my great grandparents. I'm preserving. And I think about culture. And how culture is preserved through projects where it doesn't really have to be a cultural moment, or it doesn't have to be like, oh, we're doing this for the culture, blah, blah, blah. I think that happens automatically, especially when you're in spaces from like an architect lens that is that has existed before. Like for instance, we're in this building right now. This building has existed before. We're preserving it. The work that's being done at Sandman and the docks, preservation. The new Esperson building that I'm in right now. New office space.
We're gonna get to that.
Preservation. And I think exactly that, double click on what you said, we are culture, and we add value to whatever situation is going on. And I think when we allow ourselves to understand that, when we put ourselves in a preservation sort of put ourselves in like a preservation sort of mindset, I think we can create fashion culture, music culture, architect culture, any culture that we want to fucking incubate. It happens by default from us, black folks, which gets to my next subject where this will be like a little bit of a two-parter. Those walls.
The walls.
The walls.
But wait, let me get back. Let's go back before we get to the walls.
Okay.
Though. I just had to look this up because I didn't want to butcher it. But what you're saying basically is like, even though we don't necessarily invent things, when we involve ourselves in them, we give them a different spin.
Mm-hmm.
We are able to take. It's honestly why like the project that this podcast has helped me see how poignant Duchamp's urinal was, like, and I feel the same way about Baroque architecture, which is just a whole other sidebar. But like,
what did you say?
Baroque
architecture.
Baroque architecture.
Okay.
Baroque.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Baroque.
Okay.
Not broke.
I'm like, what the fuck is broke architecture?
No, we don't do that around
That shit
here.
is expensive.
No, like there's something, I don't know what it is. There's something that's like, you seen Citizen Kane?
I have not. I've heard of it, but I have not.
I'm forgetting his name, and people are probably gonna take me to town for that one. But anyways, the guy who did Citizen Kane, kind of like set the tone.
You want to look it up real quick?
Nah,
fuck it,
because it's not important. I'm gonna remember his name. Something with an O. Basically, that movie, that movie is considered. Let's start here. The movie is considered to be a really great movie, like top 5 movies of all time or something. Maybe top 1. I'm not sure. And I remember the first time I watched it, I hated it. So I was like, whatever. And then I probably lived more life and saw more things. And then I came back to it and I was like, wait, this is fire.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there's something about ideas, art, media that are more poignant when you go from not liking them to liking them versus just liking them off the jump. Software update.
Yeah.
Maybe liking stuff the first time isn't the vibe. Like if you like it the first time, question it, because it's usually the things that get better in time that have like 808s and Heartbreaks, for example. Like arguably, that's not my favorite album, but arguably that is Kanye's most important album. Do you get what I mean? Like, in terms of what came from that album existing. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not something that we knew at the time. That's something that you find out over time.
I just gotta say something. I have a little bit of a weird...
Say it.
This is gonna sound so fucking cocky, but bro, I have this tendency of sometimes when I listen to an album, like for the first time, I could be like automatic platinum.
Yeah, sure. But
Like,
you have good taste, and that's not what we're talking about.
Okay,
it's
bad.
different, bro.
Okay,
look, when I walk around and I look at buildings, most buildings, not even just buildings, like, I'm talking about like homes.
I know.
Are trash.
I know.
You
Okay,
have good taste, and that's good.
But I can, I can relate that to. Okay, I can see what you're saying because I was talking about this the other day. How I've passed up downtown Houston so many times, not giving a fuck about the buildings.
Yes,
and that's because I didn't really know or understand the significance of the particular building. All right, I see what you're saying.
You know
Continue
what I mean? It's
yeah.
okay. Yeah. So to me, there's something to be said for like Baroque architecture being this thing where you're like, okay, yeah, cool. It's like wavy and it's this and it's that, but you're learning, or at least I learned about it before I had ever like thought or tried to do the particulars of construction. And then when you kind of find out why so many buildings look the same is because it's like a function of how these things are built, right? And so when you have such a one-to-one between like your limits on what your design can be, like what can be realized into the world through construction, and you think to yourself, wow, like it's so hard to get a square building up. I could only imagine if my building was like super, expressive and wavy and like.
Oh, I have a question.
Do you know what I mean?
Ass.
Like, there's something about like, oh, have you ever seen the Laurentian steps? They're fire. They're basically okay.
Hold
It's
on,
like
Google.
wait. Before you Google it, I'm gonna
Okay.
describe it to you, and you tell me if I'm like hitting the nail. It looks like the building has spilled its stairs. Like the stairs are like spilling. It's
That feels like my experience at the Great Wall of China.
they're like it's almost like the buildings in Baroque architecture have like a drama to them, which is super poignant. It's like the buildings are drama, and to experience the building is to experience this like dramatic moment in a way that like, again, I think when you learn about it, we're so used to seeing like movies and images and this and this and that, and right, so it can feel a little like flat because you're like, okay, whatever. But then when you realize that like actually all that other shit I'm seeing is like a function of that original thing, which maybe doesn't hit as hard but like set the tone, it's like when people go back to, oh yeah, like I love this song, and then your parents are like, yeah, but it's a sample of this old song. You know what I mean? And like it could be really easy to like write off that older one. You're like, yeah, but whatever. But you're like, no. This is where it started, right?
Right.
And so I think you have to like learn to appreciate those kind of like
Learning to
origination points.
No, facts. But
software update.
software update on that, appreciating walls.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Context.
The context of those walls is to be able to see something as simple as a wall. Because
Yeah.
the wall that we saw, by the way, we came up with those walls, though, by going to an art exhibition in the new Esperson building, Emergent, powered by Tay Powers and United by Design. And there's like this, it was like a curvature situation that was happening with the wall.
Yeah.
But once again, if you weren't into that, or if we weren't into that, that's something probably somebody would pass right up.
Yeah.
And
I mean, okay, so to paint the picture architecturally, it's like you have a grid of, steel columns, right? And in a way, as an artist or a person who's displaying works on the wall, you're looking at the grid more as like a delimiter. Like you're looking at it as the space between. So the space between the columns is like your canvas, and that's the thing that's the backdrop for your pieces of work. But it's interesting because we found ourselves looking at the space in between the paintings. Like we were looking at the column as though it was a piece of artwork because of the way that like the gypsum, basically the drywall, was like curving.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, I don't know.
It felt like art without it being.
It felt
art.
like it was art. I'm just like,
Yeah.
wait, that's so intentional.
Yes.
Like it's very intentional because you would never, like no contractor, no drywall guy would ever do that by his own volition. Like he would tell you, wait, you want me to curve the drywall?
Right.
Like, what are you
right.
saying?
Right.
I can't just put up the.
Which brings up my next question to you that I've been dying to ask.
Go for it.
Is it true that engineers and architects hate each other?
I don't know about hate.
Not really hate, but is it true that engineers hate working with Zaha Hadid?
Oh, I'm sure I would hate that, bro. Okay, so here's the deal. I think so. There's an.
I've been
interesting-
dying to ask you this fucking question.
So there's an interesting. So okay, that's a good question actually because it does relate to like process and
in those walls though.
and those walls though, but it also relates to any given architect's ability to do more than just design pretty things. What do I mean by that? So at the firm I work at, what's interesting is we design wild shit, but we also think through the process of how it might be built, and we get people involved to like help us figure it out. So there's an intuition about, okay, if I'm going to do, this interesting like curved wall with like a cove ceiling and some lighting, and I want it to look a particular way, I might already have an intuition around like structurally what might be required, or assemblies and like how much space I might need in my wall to achieve this goal. And like I can start to think in like a material way about the requirements to make it real. the issue is there's a lot of designers, not even just architects. There's a lot of designers who will like have an idea and they'll say, hey, I want my building to do this. But they don't necessarily have like a connection or an intuition or like a respect or even like a deference to the difficulty of making that happen. Do you know what I mean? And so there's times where they will just take a design wholesale and be like, hey, I'm going to do a sketch. Like, Stephen Hall, the building, the Kinder building?
Mm-hmm.
That's by Stephen Hall. And he is known for literally making watercolor sketches of his buildings.
Mm.
Like he's just like, he's just like, hey, all right, here you go, make this. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, when you just take an image of something and you say, hey, make this real, and then you're so like tied to, no, this has to be the image, then I could see there being friction between the person who has to actually make it real is telling you like, yo, beams don't do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like steel will deflect. Like,
right.
I know you don't want any seams, but I'm telling you, you might need some seams. You know what I mean? Like there's some like material realities. And going back to our firm's approach is like, we kind of use those material realities as like we lean into them and we leverage them to say, okay, cool. If we're going to need a seam because you can only get, pieces of lumber that are like max 10, 12 feet long. Okay, then how do we use that limitation, so to speak, in a way that can be like productive, or we use it to our advantage? And so I think that's the difference. Like if you can think in terms of, all right, what are the material realities of what you're creating, and can that help you inform or design something that can like support or like be amenable to those, then you're fine. But if you can only design images that you are then requiring other people to like one-to-one make real, then you're probably going to have problems. Because our relationship with our engineers is great. We work with like, engineers, mill workers, like all sorts of craftspeople who we say like, hey, we want to make this image and we've thought about it being constructed like this. Is this something that is realistic? If it's not, what do we need to do to change our design? Or what limitations are you thinking that there are in terms of what the material can do? Or, you know what I mean? Like we were talking about a roof the other day, and like in our model, we were just showing like the piece at the top of the parapet was like, it's like a little piece of stone that's going to like barely come proud of the brick or of the stone, whatever the building is. We don't know yet. And the contractor was looking at it. He was like, yeah, you're showing it as like, 30 feet long, but you're going to have sections of material that you're going to need to cut because they only come so long. And then because of that, you're going to have expansion and movement, and then you're going to get like your perfect edge that you want on your building is actually going to be a little wavy because the material is going to move a little bit. Do you know what I mean? So it's like stuff like that where now you think to yourself, okay, how do we design with that like physical material reality such that we are either okay with that movement or we consider that movement to then, design beyond it and like solve whatever problem that might create. So that's a long-winded way of saying, no, we don't, but Zaha is special.
Bro, I'm still taken aback about just like the way that she was able to just get things to curve.
Oh, it's
like
crazy.
She was just like so obsessed with just like.
Have you seen her furniture?
Yes.
Furniture's crazy. See,
Insane.
to me, what's impressive about Zaha, like her buildings are cool, but to me, it's like her
buildings are cute.
They cool though. They cool. But like her furniture to me is what did it. Because there is something like her furniture, her sketches are super cool too. Yeah, I'm typically drawn to, like, I'm trying to think, like Mies van der Rohe, the guy who did the Law Building, which is like a fine building. I don't like being in his buildings, but like conceptually, they're cool. I think they're like, I don't know. I view modernism more as like, less like, oh man, these spaces are fire, I want to be in them all the time, and more like, oh, this is kind of an experiment on how you can think about building, both in terms of like the technology of building, but then also like what space can be. I feel like Frank Lloyd Wright's kind of underrated. in academia. Sorry.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we don't learn about him.
Word.
Not really. At least in my program, we didn't.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time on, like I said, Baroque architecture. Borromini has this really, really cool church. I'm going to butcher the name, but just look up Borromini. And he has this church that's like, it's like elliptical, but it's like a weird ellipse. And it's a domed elliptical moment in the church. And then there's like a pattern of like these plus signs that are like all splaying out, but it's so beautiful. It's so nice. But I didn't appreciate that when I first learned about it. It was just like, oh yeah, whatever, that's cool.
It kind of reminds me of my new discovery of, I think, my favorite architect between Zaha. He was like, oh shit. I think between Zaha and Renzo.
That's an easy one, bro. It's Renzo.
It's
for you though. For you, I always say choose Renzo.
Choose
Renzo.
It really, because I've seen that damn Hermes store in Tokyo thousands of times. And
is that by Zaha? I don't know.
That's by Renzo Piano.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Every fucking building that I like is made by Renzo, bro.
Renzo
like,
is cold.
Like, I swear, because I'd seen it. So this tall ass building in Tokyo is like covered in what is that glass called? Where
is
you
it like blocks?
Yes.
Yeah, glass block.
Yeah, the whole thing is made out of that.
Oh, sick.
The whole store.
So like, okay.
So it illuminates at night, and like also like, you know, you can kind of see the material of it during the day.
Yeah.
But I think that's crazy that that's now 3 buildings.
Yeah.
That I'm obsessed with. The one in Paris, the one in Tokyo, and then the one here in Houston.
Yeah.
That's
Renzo's
literally
cold.
like my whole existence. Houston, Paris, Tokyo. It's like, that's my whole fucking shit.
Lupe.
Yeah, that was a good one. You got me on that. Who's your favorite architect?
Bro, I've been trying to think of that. That's a good question. That is a good question because
I feel like that's asking me who's my favorite fucking fashion designer.
Yeah, and like maybe for you, you'd probably say I can't answer that, but I can give you my favorite collection or something.
I mean, Margiela, but there's also more other than Margiela. But
yeah,
as you were,
I think of. This is gonna be a crazy answer because he's not really an architect, but I'm gonna say Donald Judd.
He wasn't considered an architect?
Actually, funny story. I started reading this essay. The tab is open on my phone, and I started reading this essay. But apparently, okay, you know who Peter Zumthor is?
No.
Okay. He did this project called the Therm Valves. It's cold. You just got to look it up. Peter Zumthor, Therm Valves. He also had a Serpentine Pavilion. Anyways, he did this project in... maybe it was in Austria, some Kunsthal, some like art gallery basically. And it has like these pieces of glass that kind of look like reptiles. Like they kind of like, they're like scales. I don't know. It's sick. Anyways, so he built this project, and I guess the people who were getting Peter Zumthor to like build that building were also in communication with Donald Judd. And I think Donald Judd like wanted to, and like Peter Zumthor in the beginning was like, oh, bet, yeah, like Donald Judd and me, like we're gonna cook. And then Judd was like, oh, yeah, I want to build a building. And then Zumthor was like, hold up, cuz. Said, hold on, brother.
Hold on.
And it was interesting because he basically was like, he basically sunned him and was like, nah, I'm not going to do this if you're going to let Donald Judd build a building because that's my domain. Like, I need to be in charge of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, there's probably some nuance and some shit I'm losing, but... I found that super interesting that like there is a little bit of I don't know if it's like fear or aversion to people like stepping, quote unquote, in our domain or stepping on our toes. We're like, no, that's my job. Da, da, da. And so in a way, it's like even though Zumthor is a great architect, I like some of his work. Like to me, Judd kind of is an architect. Like I consider him an architect because of the way that he thinks about space.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you haven't been to Marfa, I encourage you to do that because it's one of the most amazing things. If you like art or if you like to drive, because it's far.
If you like art, you like to drive, go to Marfa.
If you like mountains.
You so country.
Hey.
I love it.
Come on, I'm just a Tennessee kid. Yeah, no, it's like he was onto something, you know. Like Judd was, you know, in New York. He had Spring Street, right, which is down in Soho. So if you go to New York, go to Spring Street on Soho. He has like this 5-floor building that he used to live in, used to make work out of. And so he was already doing the thing that was like, hey, I want to live where I work. Hey. But then he was like, fuck this, I'm leaving. I want to go out to the country and just do my thing. And so Dia Foundation actually like gave him money to like start Chinati. I don't know how that timeline wise links up with like he was probably already out there, but all to say he basically like helped make Marfa what it is. And it's like not that much, but most of it is his doing. So he has like a museum dedicated to John Chamberlain's work, who again is somebody that like when I first saw his work, you know John Chamberlain?
I've heard. I think Berlin has told me a little bit about.
Yeah,
him.
so he does these like imagine like you took some paper and crumpled it up, but instead of paper it's metal, and it's metal from cars, and so it's like way larger. And they're like these really cool colors because they're old cars and they don't have any of the logos or the branding on them, so they're like a little abstract, but like you know they're car parts. And they're like multicolored, so there's like the nice oranges that you would see in like the 70s, or like the blue, you know, like there's certain colors
that reminds me of something that's in the MFA right now.
It might be like low-key, actually low-key I think I saw a piece of his recently, and it might have been at the MFA. I think it is.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's like in the Kinder building.
It's in the new one.
Yeah.
Kinder,
That's
right?
John Chamberlain. Yes, exactly.
Word.
So in
Okay.
Marfa, there's a whole building dedicated to his works.
Okay.
And then you have like he has his artist studio where he would actually like create work. He has an architecture building which is fire.
Yeah, Berlin was telling me about that property. Shout out to the man.
Shout out to Berlin for real.
He was saying how there's like original like notes from Judd.
Yeah.
That they like
literally
left.
his work. Yeah, his work is just like as it was. Like the last time he was alive,
last time
and
I was
there.
yeah.
That's what it was. He has the block, which is like where there's that library. If you've seen images of Donald Judd's library, it's there, and he has like places to sit, and every place that he displays art, he believes in having a place to sleep because he thinks that like living amongst your art is really critical. So, and then there's Chinati, which is like its thing. It's like this whole amazing piece of work. But yeah, I think of Judd as an architect because his practice of creating these specific objects in that lineage of the Duchamp is like, it doesn't matter that he never constructed those aluminum boxes. Like he came up with the idea and then he created like an environment to augment the appreciation and the interpretation of those objects, right? Like it's like how that total thinking of like, okay, there's the object and then there's an object in space and then there's like the effect of the sunlight coming through the glass, and you know, like there's all these layers and these logistics that he's thinking of. And I've said this multiple occasions before, but I don't think ever on the pod, but like there's a certain way that when you read somebody's writings, you can understand how they think, and in a really powerful way. You're like, oh, okay, cool, this is how they construct an argument, this is the points they're laying out, this is what they're, you know, making connections between. In my opinion, Donald Judd is one of the few people who, when you experience his spaces, you can tell how he thinks about space. And that's really hard to do. I think where I work, my boss is really good at that. Like, Dylan is insanely good at architecture and space and proportion and all these things. And same thing with, like, Baroque architecture, right? There's a certain, like, attention, and you get to understand how they think about space by what they're doing with it, right? And I think, like, to me, Judd is one of the few people who has ever had me, like, walk in one of his spaces and be like, yo, I can see this man's brain right now. Like, I can see him thinking through, like, the progression and like the sequence and like
It's like hella intentionality.
it's like super intentional, and also there's like an energy to it. You know what I mean? Like it's not just about the image, even though the images of his spaces are insane. It's like how you actually move through the space and how you actually think through the space and how the space actually like augments your ability to like, you know, just think more freely. Like to me, tall ceilings always like helped me think better.
Same.
Just in general. So it's like there's all these moments. Yeah, I don't know. I've waxed poetic about Judd long enough, but Judd's my favorite architect.
So, what is your dream, I guess, project to use your architecture knowledge? What would be, I say, like a dream project or a dream building, a dream wall? You know, like
Yeah.
or do you think about that? I think when you're a fashion designer or when you think, you know, being a painter.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait. I want to hear your answer. What's your answer? What's your dream?
Like my dream job out of all this shit.
I don't know about dream job is a little too square. Sorry. Let me say that more clearly. Dream job is a little too square. Yeah, like what would be your, it's not so much like a I made it moment, but like if there's a thing you could do that would like give you the ultimate fulfillment. To me, like if you're doing what you really, 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 really like, it just doesn't feel, it's going to be difficult and challenging, but it's going to feel fulfilling.
Not necessarily a job.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, currently my most, I say inspo project is Gare.
Yeah.
Gare is stationed in French. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it how you would say it in French.
But fuck it, we ball.
But getting this project off the ground is going to be a huge success for me, because I believe, once again, when it comes back to culture preservation, we haven't had a culture of high standard local consumerism here in Houston. And when I say that, I mean like Fairfax has always had stores where you can go and feel like you're a part of culture or you're buying into culture. Same thing with Soho.
Fairfax in
LA,
yeah.
yes.
As in you can go to those places, get a slice of what is happening in those places culturally, in terms of fashion, in terms of music. I think did we have the V-Files conversation in the lost episode? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, we've definitely touched on V-Files, but in the fact that you could go to V-Files, there was certain music that was playing. There were certain people who would pull up. There was certain energy to it, and then there were certain brands that you might only find there.
Exactly. First. And that end up being something big. Yeah. Like I remember going into V-Files, it was like 2014, 2015, and
damn, you old.
And seeing a Telfar, seeing like Telfar bags just chilling on the table,
right?
Like, you know,
and now they're in what?
Like yeah, I mean, exactly. So Gare is pretty much, it's an art gallery, it's a studio, and it's also a retail experience. So whenever you work for retail, work at a luxury retail, if you sell when the season comes out and you sell that season, your client's not coming back until like the next season.
Right.
So I used to hate when managers would be like, "Did you clientele today?" And it's like, bro, I literally just sold $20,000 worth of shit. This same person is not gonna come back and buy anything until like months from now, bro. Like, what do you? You know, nobody's buying clothes like that every day.
Yeah.
Same thing when it goes for an art gallery. A lot of people go to the openings.
Yep.
A lot of people go to the closings. What is the time in between? And so for me, it's creating this space where, like a Renzo piano building, you can see what's happening in real time. Oh, that was a fucking bar. I'm sorry. But like you can see what's happening in real time. And it's the idea of democratizing information and seeing things happen in real time.
Yeah.
Um
You're in a way.
It's like I'm like mimicking translucent technology.
Yeah. So okay, let's talk about that because that's culture to me. Because I love technology. Like sometimes I just be buying shit just because it's like new. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like, there's something
when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
Did you get the stem player?
Hell no. That's silly to me.
What? That was like one of the best, probably.
It's cool, and I get it, but okay. Let me cook. So, to me, buying new technology is about. I want to interface and like be at the cusp of like where we are, so as to personally say that like I experienced these things. So like for example, I had an iPod Mini, so I remember the click wheel. That was really cool.
Love that.
It was black and white though, and it was aluminum. It was like beautiful. It was small, whatever it could hold, however many songs it could hold. And then it's like you get to the iPod Video. You have the same click wheel, but now you have a color screen, and it's a little bigger, and you can put videos. And I actually put videos on there and watched them, and then I lost it or got it stolen, whatever. And then you have like the first iPhone. You know, like you go through these evolutions, and then you get rid of the home button, and you now have like, instead of it being a click, it's like a haptic thing, and it does your thumbprint, and then you get from there to, okay, now it's all screen, and you have your face recognition. Like going through those and being like somebody who actually experiences those steps in real time is exciting to me, because it kind of like keeps me aware and like tuned in with like, this is the, not simply the speed at which we're moving, but like this is the capacity that we have. Like this is the capabilities that we have. It's just like a fun thing. So going to the translucent thing, like in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, because there's a name for this. It's like the Y2K aesthetic. There's another name for it, but if you look up Y2K aesthetic, you'll get at what we're getting at, which is like kind of like bubbly, silver, translucent, like thinking like the IMAX, right, with like the different colors and you could see through them. Thinking about like that Xbox that was like super green but see through. Like there's something. Oh, I remember my favorite Game Boy. Actually, my two favorite Game Boys was a Game Boy, maybe a Pocket or a Color, and it was like the atomic purple. So it like the Nintendo 64 had it see through. Like there was something really interesting about that era where, to my point earlier, there's like, hey, we're doing these things technologically, but because we're like making them products, we're not as like in tune or aware with like what it looks like on the inside. And there was kind of like this very specific aesthetic to like seeing the inside of things. Like it's like the X-ray
exactly
aesthetic, yeah.
And so that's what I want this to be, an experience. More so it probably will feel like fucking performance art. Like I want you to go into this space, be able to see me either I'm designing, painting, Lou for Petrostellum, same energy.
Yeah.
And then we have you and Trisha Jane working on architect projects.
Yeah.
So this could be either y'all are creating objects.
Yeah.
Y'all are creating lounge space for the conversation sort of like flow for the middle. Or you guys could be popping over and being like, Josh, I want to like try this architect method on this button up.
Yeah.
And so it's like
you're capturing the energy of studio.
Yes.
Okay, so I haven't been back to Boston since they kicked us out for COVID. But
oh, that's what happened?
I didn't tell you the story?
Uh-uh.
All right, so COVID was happening, right? COVID happened, in March is when they shut shit down.
Yeah.
So this was around the time that we do what's called like, so there's option studios, which are like the studios you take that you get to decide like, oh, I want to work with like this designer. And they're typically based in a particular city, and you typically will like visit that city that you're doing your project in. So there were people actually in Asia from our school at the time that COVID.
Oh,
Yes.
shit.
Yes. So my studio, because I'm a country bumpkin, we went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was a vibe. And we also went like a week earlier than everybody else. So we were chilling. We were back in Boston. But there were people straight up like they were in like Japan, South Korea, China even that semester, literally as there were like America was like, yo, we're shutting shit down. And so there had to be like a lot of emergency, like, yo, we need to get these people on flights like overnight, like back to the US. Yeah, it was actually like a whole thing. And then because this was over spring break, they were like, hey, spring break was a week. They're like, look, we need you guys to be out of the building by the end of this week. Just like that. So it went from like, yo, what's going on? I remember my roommates too. They were like, man, why you buying water and toilet paper? I was like, I don't know, bro. You never know. And then I bring that up to them all the time because I was like, hey, you remember that time y'all trying to play me? So all to say, yeah, they basically kicked us out of the building, and so I stole 2 of their El Croquis books. Thank you. I still have them. That was like my like if you're gonna kick me out of the resources that we have for this semester and for the rest of my time,
I'm leaving here with something.
Mind you, those were like you could only check those out for 24 hours at a time.
I think I remember you telling me about these damn books.
And they still have the sticker Harvard GSD.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
god.
I took that shit. Anyways, yeah. So I haven't, and then so we left the building, and then we basically stayed in our homes, like our apartments, from like March until probably like June. And by that time, I'm like, look, even if they were to say, hey, you can come back to school, like, I'm not going to wait for them to allow me back and just pay rent until then. Like, I'm going to go home. And so I left Boston, and I haven't been back since. I mentioned that. All of that was to say, I think you should go to the architecture school building because there's this really interesting effect that occurs as a function of how the building was built. They call it the trays unofficially. But basically, it's like on a slant, like the back half of the building is slanted. And it's because each of the floors like comes out almost like it's like a drawer being pulled out incrementally. And so if you're on the top, like the 5th level of the trays, you can actually look down and see all 4 floors below you. And so it's this really cool environment where as you're walking up and down and across, you're seeing literally everybody's projects, like all the things they're working on, all the models they have, all the drawings they have. You're constantly being like, you're just soaking up design and energy and ideas in a way that's like so exciting, so energizing. It can be intense, like during the finals, it's super intense. But in a way, what I'm hearing you describe is like, how do we capture that energy that comes from just seeing somebody working on something cool as you're walking by? Having a conversation and something they share with you or vice versa inspires what you guys go and do next, you know, because that's what a lot of it is. A lot of it is like, oh, I saw this book on your desk, or I saw this model you were working on, or I saw this material. Can you tell me more about it? And just off the strength of curiosity and conversation, now you have like this really cool thread to follow.
Oh my God. That was it. That's in my curiosity is community is the visit. Community is the visitor. Curiosity is the oil and battery.
There you go. Software update right there.
It's being curious, and I think curiosity what draws you to even go to an art gallery.
Yeah.
Go to a Dover Street Market. Go to a place that you've seen, and you're just like, I'm curious about this place. I want to pull up here. And so that's what Gare would be. It would be a place where, because I think since we have to travel in vehicles, it's not going to be like a highly foot traffic situation. I mean, it can be, you know, when there's events and stuff like that. But I'm thinking like more on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, but it's also something where, like you said, so this. Let's back up. your idea for Gare is, correct me if I'm wrong, a function of trying to get out of the over-reliance on nightlife as the venue and the time for conversations. Meaning, like, you can only have certain types of conversations at night, but that's usually when you're seeing a lot of people. And that's usually the only opportunity you have to, like, really relax and let loose. Because, I mean, let's be honest. If you're not at your house and you're not at work,
or at
anywhere,
the gym.
anywhere, well, let me start. If you're not at your house, you're not at work. Anywhere else you go, you got to pay. Basically.
Yeah.
So the idea of, like, the third space is what we're talking about. The third space being, like, a free third space, mind you. The third space being, like, where can you go and build community? A lot of people do it, you know, at, like, the gym could be that, right? But you might have to pay for that. So after hours or going out at night to places that you don't have to pay money to get into creates that opportunity potentially. But it also is, like, typically tainted by whatever substances or fluids people decide to imbibe. Whereas with Gare, there presents this opportunity, same way with Moth, that, like, hey, there's a place you can go to, connect, build community, and the context of that space is not fundamentally anything beyond curiosity and community. And it's like, oh, we can take a meeting there. You could connect with somebody, be like, oh, I saw you out. Like, hey, man, come by my studio. Let's, like, talk about this idea that you have, where we have resources and opportunity and space and time and sunlight and all the great things that make humans happy. We got water. We should get a sponsored by a water company. That'd be lit. That's, like, one of the only sponsorships I'd be down for, because I like water a lot. Anyways, yeah, so you have all these things, all these implements to like support an exciting, healthy, creative conversation, and it makes it to where that can be the star also. You know what I mean? Like, going out at night is fun occasionally, but, like, software update, it's way cooler to just, like, kick it with the homies and look at books and talk about art and
totally. So that's what the space would be, and then there's a retail portion.
Yeah.
So
I hate capitalism, but keep going.
Got to pay the bills somehow, some way.
I feel you, bro.
They exit through the gift shop. That's sort of like,
talk more about that.
So whenever I went to this Yayoi Kusuma exhibition in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, the Botanic Gardens, there was this giant pumpkin sculpture, and it was like black and yellow.
Yeah.
I forgot it was like black and yellow polka dots, inverted, vice versa, whatever. Bro, I went to the gift shop. There was so much yellow and black polka dot stuff I'm talking about umbrellas, handkerchiefs, plates, T-shirts, socks, hat. I looked at that shit and I was like, Josh, I don't give a damn what anybody and how anybody makes you feel about Richard and Grace. This is exactly what the fuck you've been doing.
Yeah.
Like, you've been making art, and then the byproduct of your art is some fly-ass clothes.
Yes.
And if anybody makes you feel that's selling out or that's whack, they can kick fucking rocks. Because at the end of the day, if I'm able to pay my bills off this art shit, then ultimately, I mean, kind of going back to what's the dream job or what's my blah, you know, that's the ultimate, you know, hey, mom, I made it type vibe, is the fact that I do get to finance my lifestyle through the things that I like to do.
Yeah.
But I'm also having a place where community can go, and it's like that it's like a software update in real time, where I'm offering the city of Houston a place and a space to see somebody grow with the community in real time and still participate in capitalism.
Yeah.
And then not just be so like, oh, you're selling out and all this other bullshit. It's like, if you go to any major art exhibition, museum, there's always a gift shop. Mm-hmm. And so that's what this Gare situation would be. It would be the gift shop of product that you may sell, Trisha may sell. Well, I mean, what I'm thinking right now are the people in Gare is me, you, Trisha, the whole Petrostellum family, you know,
Yeah.
Lou and Kay, my boy Joseph. You met Joe. And that's like for starters for right now,
Yeah.
and seeing what we can do
Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, like proximity, right? Just like off the strength of us meeting up on Saturdays and like chopping it up and like having space both physically and temporally to both kind of like unwind but just like get ideas off, you know, like that is important.
But also double clicking, that's us moving culture, going back to culture.
Yeah.
Episode 3 and 4 being combined, we're creating those walls
Yeah.
to where we are creating a new culture of collaboration, which this city sucks at.
Yeah. Well, okay. We established on that bike ride, however long ago that was, the same bike ride where we came up with the idea for the pod, that Houston has a branding problem.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, fine. Houston has a branding problem, but my question now is it intentional? Is the branding problem intentional? Like, if it's too well branded, does it become Austin? We don't want that. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it's too like, yo, look how lit we are, everybody should pull up. Like, in a way, we
Like the whole Austin's weird, keep Austin weird thing.
no, just I don't know. I haven't spent enough time in Austin, so I'm not going to speak ill about Austin. But
Ooh, don't.
I know,
don't
but
do that.
I'll say this. I'll say this. So I'm from Tennessee, right? And Tennessee, in my book, has 4 major cities: Knoxville, where I was born; Chattanooga, where I grew up; Memphis, where my dad lives; and then Nashville, where country music lives. And I grew up going to 3 of those 4. And Nashville was always a place I passed through. I quite literally never like properly visited Nashville until I was an adult, like after college, probably during grad school actually. And to me, Nashville feels like the Austin of Tennessee.
Okay.
Because when people say they went to Tennessee, it's always Nashville they're talking about. But to me, the real parts of Tennessee are like, sure, there's country music, but like to me, the real part of Tennessee is like, you got to go to the Smoky Mountains, you got to go to the Appalachian Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. You need to see what that looks like. Or you go to Memphis and you have like the blues and like the history, right? Like along the Mississippi, right? There's a lot of history there too. Chattanooga, there's like civil wars that took place there, like beautiful place right on the, the border with Georgia. A lot of history, Trail of Tears, all that shit. But like, every time somebody says like, yo, I went to Tennessee and it's Nashville, I'm just like, oh, you got like the commercial Tennessee. Do you know what I mean? You got the palatable version of Tennessee. You got the Tennessee that's like been marketed and packaged and kind of like, here you go, here's Tennessee. But like, there's way better and more authentic parts of it. And so I kind of feel like Austin might be that for Texas.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Between Austin and Dallas, and even in San Antonio, I feel like there has been a packaging of these places. In Houston,
is just real to me.
Yeah.
To me, Houston is about authenticity. And that's why I asked, like, is the branding problem intentional? Like, is it so authentic to the point where people in Houston are like, I actually don't give a fuck if people come here because like I know it's lit and I'm chilling.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that is kind of the tenor. But I almost wish. I got a friend who visited from DC. He was like, bro, this place is fire. Like, everybody who comes here is like, yeah, this place is lit. But it doesn't get out. It doesn't get out that, like, 1, it's lit, and 2, there are people who are, like, cool like you. You know, like, that's the thing. It's like, you always, well, going to school in the Northeast, the tone of most people, because most people are not from the South when you go to school outside of the South. They're either from, like, West Coast, Northeast, Midwest. You have a lot of international students. But it's like very few people, in my experience, were like from like the Tennessees, the Georgias, North Carolinas, Texases, whatever. And so for the most part, people have this opinion that like, yo, fuck the South. I'm never going there. Slavery's bad. Like,
Yeah.
y'all ain't shit. Everybody's backwards and stupid and slow. You know what I mean? Like, that's
Yeah.
kind of the overarching, like, stereotype, which there are places that are going to be that. Sure. Like, Asheville is beautiful, but if you've ever driven through on either side of Asheville, like, you're going to see some really sad shit. Like, you can see some billboards for like Narcan and all this stuff, and you're like, yo, this place kind of wild. You know what I mean? But like, there's a certain sort of like reality to like, hey, this is the reality of what the vestige of slavery has left this part of the country, right? That like, this is how bad that shit was. Like, most of these places are super backwards, super left in the dust, and like don't have the infrastructure. All to say, if more people knew how much the South had to offer, and like not only how much it has to offer, but like how much opportunity there is to like take what we're learning elsewhere and like invest it in a place like this, so that we can have that infrastructure for culture, that infrastructure for like, you know, healthier living and all of these things. I don't know. I'm just saying, South is cool. I like it. It's funny because my grandfather, he passed away a couple years ago, but he was always like super like pro getting out of the South. So he did, like, he came from Panama. And then he eventually settled in Knoxville, Tennessee, where he worked as a material science professor. Super smart guy, had a PhD, all this stuff. But it was funny because he was like, bro, you're in Tennessee. Like, I can't choose where I'm born. My mom came to UT because you taught there. So, like, of course I'm going to be in the South. But it was almost like a challenge. He was like, hey, you need to make it out the South now, you know. So getting out of the South was like the thing I was always aware I was doing. But then to go to school in Philadelphia, and then I lived in Chicago, and then I went to grad school in Boston. After that, I was like, I'm kind of over coastal cities. I'm kind of over the whole sentiment that, like, if you're on either coast or whatever, that you're just, like, inherently smarter or better. And I'm like, this place that I come from that maybe I don't have a close relationship to, but it made me, so I need to, like, find out more about it, invest into it, and, like, see what it can continue to, like, give me. And so that's what, like, living in Houston has been. Like,
because on a software update, the East Coast and the West Coast needs no more cultural incubation.
That's real.
We all in the South.
Well, there's also like, okay, that's interesting. We're going to get to what you're saying. We're all in the South. But like, that's interesting point, because what happens is you have, you know, all these good schools on the coasts. And so you have this like oversaturation of talent, which means like, you know, the laws of economics suggest that if there's like an oversupply of something, that like the demand, they don't have to pay you as much, basically. That's what I'm getting at. Like, you can have all the top tier, you know, credentials, and they can be like, look, we're going to pay you $65,000 to live in New York. Mm-hmm. And you're going to love it.
And you're going to love it.
And you're going to look at them and you'll be like, wait, I don't want that though. I can't live on that salary. Like, well, guess what? That's not my problem. Because there's somebody who will take it. You get what I mean? And like, it's the race to the bottom mentality where like, I want to be in New York, so I guess I just got to accept what they give me. Like, basically, New York as a city is kind of like a bully. You know what I mean? It's like, but so many people want to be that bully's friend that they'll put up with that abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Software update.